Welcome into today's podcast, Zach Moore Podcast 37. I think 37, maybe 38. Gonna be a fun show today. Got a lot of stuff about space, got a little bit of stuff about um I got an interesting story that I want to tell, and then I have a hypothetical scenario that I think is enjoyable. So today's beverage of choice going to be this. I don't know if the camera flips this around in post, but this is the Black Rifle Coffee Company. This is their rich mocha iced coffee in a can, 300 milligrams of caffeine. We're looking at, per this one thing, 130 calories. As a result of 2.5 grams of fat, 20 grams of carbs, 5 grams of protein. So that is going to be doing it. Does have MCT oil. They do say good source of protein on this, but 5 grams for 130 calories, not looking great. But it tastes really good. They have other flavors as well that are very good. This blueberry mocha one is my favorite. It's very, very good. And guess where I got it from? I didn't get it from Costco or wherever. I actually got it from the dollar store. I'm going to Planet Fitness, and right across in the other side of the lot is a dollar store, and I go over there, check it out. And they have this, and then they also have, I'm not sure if many people know about this, but Alani Nu. My wife, she loves their energy drinks that they have, and so we get a bunch from there as well. And it's in GNC. So when I used to work for GNC, it was particularly for the females, the most popular drink. So very cool. But I guess without further ado, let's kind of get into the show. I don't want to skedaddle. I don't want to be disrespectful to your time either. So let's get into our first story. Evidence of alien life may exist in the fractures of icy moons around Jupiter and Saturn. On this left of the picture right here, if you're watching this, that is Titan. Very, very cool. And then on the right is a moon that's in the orbit around Jupiter. Jovian moon of Jupiter. All right, let's get into the article. I didn't realize that I could do this. This reader review. It makes it so much easier to read these articles. Because I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there are some very interesting and very weird advertisements on some of these articles. Anywho, scientists are investigating specific geological features on the largest moons of both Jupiter and Saturn that could be ideal spots for the emergence of life elsewhere in the solar system. So obviously we know about Saturn, and they've sent a mission to Titan. This was a few years back, where they were able to actually film the surface of Titan, because in the atmosphere there is a bunch of clouds, so it's very hard from a satellite's view to see the surface and see what exactly is on the ground. But we have sent missions there in the past, and this article is going to continue to talk about it, but we are going to send some there in the future, so hopefully we get some good stuff. And speaking of good stuff, excuse the camera change, but such seismic features are generated on these icy moons. Scientists believe that when these bodies orbit their parent gas giant planets, the planet's immense gravitational force influence generate tidal forces that squash and squeeze the moons, inevitably flexing these, what they would call, satellite surfaces. Plus, these tidal forces aren't very consistent with the orbits of both, because the orbits of both moons are elliptical, meaning they are sometimes closer to Jupiter or Saturn. Other times are much further away. That in turn leads to even stronger tidal forces. We are interested in studying shear deformation on icy moons because that type of faulting can facilitate the exchange of surface and subsurface materials through shear heating processes, potentially creating environments conducive for the emergence of life. Lillian Burkhardt, lead author of the research and a scientist at the Hawaii Institute of Geophysics and Planetology, said in a statement. Then it continues to go on and kind of talk about the specific of Titan, because a lot of people believe that, especially after visiting, that Titan seems to be the more likely source of where we would potentially find life on these outer planets. I mean, once you get out to the orbit of Jupiter or Saturn, it's starting to get really cold out there because you're so far away from the sun. And that's the main concern there, although there are some places out there that we believe to have liquid water. It still is very hard for life to survive out there, especially life as we know it. Life as we know it cannot survive out there. So, I mean, this is pie in the sky type thinking, but that does not necessarily mean that future missions won't be able to prove whether or not that, or at least give strong indications whether or not there is life. Moving on. Saturn's moon Titan has surface temperatures around minus 290 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 179 degrees Celsius. So very cold. During its flybys of Titan, NASA's Cassini spacecraft, a mission that actually ended when I was in college, and I remember watching that mission, and it was very emotional. If you'll let me pause this for a second and kind of try and set the scene a little bit here, because when I was in college is my let me stop the share because I think this is important. Kind of what got me into, I guess, science, particularly space and astronomy, was all throughout high school. I took science courses and I took science classes, but if you ask anybody who really knew me back then, I didn't care at all really about space or about any of this stuff really until I got to college and I had to take an elective course. And one of the courses was astronomy. And I thought, huh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I see some things online that say it's literally a class that's very easy to get an A in. It's a somebody who I knew who was I think like a semester or a grade above me had taken the course, and they said when they took it, it was just a video game that you would play, and that's how you get credit. So you just basically play a video game and it teaches you a lesson, and then you kind of do your modules or your assignments that way. So I signed up. I said, I'll try it out. I am going to be doing journalism. This is my very first semester, by the way. Let's see what kind of happens, and we'll figure it out. So get into class, and it might have been the first, if not the first day within the first week. One of our first assignments is to go view the solar eclipse. It would be passing right over us in Pennsylvania. So we would get a pretty good look at it, not directly overhead, but to a point where we could very, very clearly see a solar eclipse, which I'd never seen previously. And so our assignment in class was to go to a place where it's kind of open and view the solar eclipse. So, me excited, I said to my friends at the time, hey, do you guys want to go look at this? And some said yes. And so I wouldn't even say friends. I mean, people that I knew on my floor. We go, we're sitting out in the Penn State Arboretum outside. and we're looking up, and we got in class these things to guard our eyes from the sun, because you're basically staring directly at the sun. It's just that the moon is just covering most of it up, but you're still getting sun rays that are peeking out behind it. Time going by, and more people are gathering, and you can tell that a lot of people know that this is going to happen, that there is going to be a solar eclipse. And you got people there timing it, people with telescopes that have these huge contraptions on it to block most of the light, but they're getting really good looks, and it's this huge spectacle. And everybody's counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. And as we get down to it, I'm getting more and more excited. I mean, I've seen the stars and stuff, and at that point, I had never seen the Milky Way. I still don't think I've ever really seen the Milky Way. Been at a place where it's dark enough to view that, but this was the first time in my life where it was this, whoa, something's going on out in space. There's this event that's happening, and got more and more excited as the count got closer and closer to zero, and they said 0, and I saw as on one side, I believe on my right side, to the right of myself. I don't know where I was facing, north, west, south, or east, but I remember on my right side starts to get a little darker. And then it kind of goes over my head. And as I'm looking through these specific glasses to help shield my eyes, and I'm looking at the sun, I see it get dim, and it stays there for about a minute and a half. But you can very, very clearly see that the moon is moving side to side. Seeing that, especially at that point when I'm new to Penn State, I'm not exactly having a huge friend group. I mean, I kind of just knew the people who I lived with on my floor. I didn't know anybody going to Penn State from my high school or any of my friends growing up. However, I got to see that, and that was one of the coolest things that I'd seen at that point in my life, and it really inspired me to go out and get more involved in the class, because right after that we had class, I believe either the next day, because I don't think it was a Friday class. We go back and we write a report on it. We talk about it in class, and I'm talking to the people next to me, and I'm like, dude, that was like so cool. Were you there yesterday? Everybody's like, yeah, I saw it. I saw it. I saw it. And then the teacher goes in to describe exactly what is happening. She's saying, well, the orbit of the moon is coming around the Earth, and you can mathematically time it so that you know exactly when it's going to be. That's why we knew in advance, because we can track the orbit of the moon. We know its path. We know where it's going to be at what times. And then same thing with the sun. And you can line it up, and you could say, hey, at this particular location on Earth at this time, you'll be able to see the solar eclipse. And being in central Pennsylvania, State College, Pennsylvania, I was able to see this event, and that's what jump started it. And then I remember the next thing that really got me intrigued was the talking about the seasons and exactly why we have the seasons as a result of the tilt of the earth. And speaking about it and describing it in class made so much sense to me, and kind of shifted my perspective on the earth. Whereas before I was just like, yeah, it's just the sun. And I had thought that it was because we're orbiting closer to the sun, and the days are longer that time, but I didn't know why. And I was actually wrong about that first part. It's not because we are any closer to the sun. In fact, sometimes it's quite the opposite, where we're not talking millions and millions of miles, but there is a difference at certain points during the winter time where we're closer than when we are in the summer months, when we may be further away from the sun. What changes is as you rotate the Earth, because we're on a 23.5 degree angle, if you're right here, as the Earth turns and the sun's rays are coming from this way, if you're right here, you're going to be getting that sunlight directly overhead. And how my professor talked about it in class was, if you go out during the summer and you track where the sun goes throughout the course of the day, the sun's going to go directly up over your head during the summer. Now, do that same test in the wintertime. If you look in the wintertime, the sun's going to go just barely above the horizon, sometimes halfway above the horizon, but certainly not directly over your head. And as a result of those two differences, the days are not only longer, but there's also more direct sunlight on you during the summers, particularly in North America. And from that point on, I was just hooked. I was like, this is so cool, because it was a science subject, unlike math, where I could understand it and I could visualize and I could explain these things to my friends at the time. And I would say to them, dude, this is so cool that this is actually a real thing that happens. And like, we're so lucky. And then just thinking about the consequences of, if one of these things, if the Earth's tilt was a little bit more or a little bit less, what that would mean for life here on Earth. Would I be here right now? And then having all of those thoughts cascade into one another and really, really explode in my head. I thought many times that this was definitely something that I would have an interest in. And then I started taking a lot of astronomy classes. So, yeah, that's kind of my story about really getting into this stuff, like science and that kind of stuff. And just there's never, I mean, once you kind of think about it, it's hard not to, at least for myself, to not think about the universe that is out there. The the facts of black holes being out there, neutron stars, supernovas. Thinking about this stuff and looking at stories and looking at images of these kind of things is one of the coolest things ever. And it's something I think about on a daily basis now. And I find it very hard not to. Once I kind of understood this stuff and the reality of why this happens or why that happens, once I kind of learned about that stuff via college, is what made me really appreciate it more, because I could know it more so in depth. It wasn't just scientists say this or that thing. It's no, here is direct imagery. Here is satellite images. Here is your satellite, or your telescope, I should say, here on campus that you looked at. You looked through and you saw this individual star and you were able to track it, or this individual planet and you were able to track it. Or, I think I talked about this previously, going to the Dominican Republic with my beautiful wife, seeing Saturn and Jupiter through a telescope for the very first time. If I was alone, I probably would have broke down crying. It was one of the more surreal experiences of my life, because you spend so much, especially for me, somebody who thinks about this stuff so frequently, thinks about the possibility of us being alone, of us being so lucky that we're able to experience this, that I'm able to record a podcast. I don't have to worry about gathering food and resources and fighting in a war in 25 BC. I'm living in 2023. And I have a job that I enjoy. I make enough money so that I'm not having to live out as a homeless man in the streets. And much of that is due because my wife also provides us a living as well. And combined, the both of us, we're doing good. And hopefully with this, I can put as much time and effort into this. And hopefully one day this could be my full-time job. I mean, I would love for this. I'd love to have guests on the show. People come on that I can ask questions and understand more. Like, not even just like a Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of dude, but NBA and NFL players, and ask them these questions about what they think about this stuff. Because I guarantee you, Tom Brady is not thinking about black holes. He's not thinking about K218b. And bringing this stuff to their attention would hopefully give them an idea of the reality in which we live in, and that we don't know. We do not know what is going on. And for me, it's very comforting because I don't have to know what's going on because nobody does. Back to the article. When the NASA Dragonfly mission, which launches in 2027, arrives at Titan in 2034, it will send a rotocraft lander to fly across the frigid surface of this moon in an effort to hunt for those potential biological signs. That doesn't exactly mean it'll search for bug-eyed aliens, however. At the very least, the team hopes the lander will detect the chemical building blocks of life we're familiar with. Now, I'll pull up a picture and kind of show you what this spacecraft is, but let's continue reading. The Dragonfly mission is initially set to land at the Selk crater area on Titan. This is because when calculating the stress exerted on Titan's surface as a result of tidal forces, researchers weren't only focused on whether there might be signs of extraterrestrial life on the ground. They also explored the chance that the Selk crater could be subjected to shear deformation to figure out whether it's a safe landing spot option for Dragonfly. So the gravity from Saturn, in the case of Titan, is so great that the actual surface is being pushed and pulled and stretched, which is crazy to think about. Burkhardt and colleagues also looked at the geology of the Jovian moon, Ganymede, which is around Jupiter, to investigate the icy body's history of tidal stress. In particular, the team looked at a bright region in the northwest of Ganymede called Phyllis Sulcus, which is composed of parallel sets of fractures. All right, the researchers basically looked at available high-resolution observations of the area to find that there are different regions of tectonic deformation and bands of light terrain that cross over each other. The cross-cutting nature of these bands indicated to Burkhardt and colleagues the existence of three distinct areas of geological activity: ancient, intermediate, and young. When investigating other parts of Phyllis Sulcus, the team found the direction of slip features to have different alignments. This implies these features may have been generated by processes other than high tidal stress. Quote, so Ganymede has had a tidal midlife crisis, but its youngest crisis remains enigmatic, Burkhardt added. The geological investigations undertaken by the team and others are vital for forming the missions of spacecraft that aim to explore solar system moons like Titan and Ganymede. Dragonfly, Europa Clipper, and ESA's JUICE will further constrain our modeling approach. So those are other missions that are going as well, but let's talk just simply about Dragonfly. Wait here, this is kind of what it's going to look like. If you're watching this on video, it's basically a big giant drone that's going to be on the surface of Titan. It's very, very cool. And we have something on a much smaller scale, but similar to this already on the surface of Mars. We have a helicopter, and I've shown that video so many times. It's called Ingenuity. We've talked about it many times. Dragonfly is a planned spacecraft and mission to send a robotic rotocraft to the surface of Titan, the largest moon of Saturn. Planned to be launched 2028 in July. It would then use its vertical takeoffs and landings capability to move between exploration sites. All right. So it's an astrobiology mission to Titan to assess its microbial habitability and study its prebiotic chemistry at various locations. All right. And you can kind of see here. I don't want to go too much in depth, but here's the mission that I was actually talking about earlier. All right, this video, the descent imager spectral radiometer during the descent of the Huygens onto Titan, January 14th, 2005. This is video of them landing on Titan. University of Arizona. Sound is weird. You can kind of see as it's coming through, it's getting more and more clear. It's getting more data coming back. Kind of shift forward. Now you can really see the surface coming into view. That's crazy. Getting lower and lower. Really coming down to the surface. About a touchdown. These are pictures around. Pretty crazy. Yeah. So that was 2005. Now this one we're hopefully going to get a lot better data than this on this mission. But yeah, something to look out for, something cool. The potential of alien life on these two moons. Moving on. All right, let's go back to another story that we've talked about in the past. Bennu and Osiris Rex. Really interesting mission. I've been following this one for a while just because I think it's important and cool. So this was yesterday. Head scratcher. First look at asteroid dust brought to Earth offers surprises. This is nature.com. 2.5 months since NASA's first asteroid sample mission landed safely on Earth. Technicians have carefully plucked more than 70 grams of asteroid dust and pebbles from the outside of the spacecraft's canister. It's more than 10 times the amount ever brought back from an asteroid. But these early discoveries are still a long way from where planetary scientists had hoped to be after the September 24th touchdown. Last month, researchers at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, discovered that 2 of the 35 screws that fastened the lid of the sample return canister couldn't be opened, blocking access to the remainder of the space rock. Curators used tweezers to pull out what they could, but NASA is not making new screwdrivers so it can get into the equipment. It flew billions of kilometers across the solar system to the asteroid Bennu and back. Oh, but NASA is now making new screwdrivers. Sorry, they are making screwdrivers. I was going to criticize them, be like, why are you not? Until then, it's kind of like Schrodinger's sample. A planetary scientist said, we don't know what's in there. Okay. All right. When pieces of asteroid fall to Earth as meteorites, they pass through the planet's atmosphere. All right. Among the hull is a 3.5 centimeter long rock, the biggest collected at Bennu. It is so big that it jammed the spacecraft collecting mechanism open when Osiris Rex briefly touched the asteroid surface in 2020. Like nearly all of Bennu material, the rock is dark colored almost to the point of being black, but it also has a bluish sheen to it. That's similar to highly reflective boulders that Osiris Rex photographed on the surface of Bennu as it was orbiting. Other smaller chunks within the Bennu sample have light-colored reflective coatings, making them appear bright against the other dark pebbles. But under a scanning electron microscope, they showed themselves to be colored in a highly brittle layer that breaks easily to reveal a darker interior. Chemical analysis show that this light-colored surface skin contains magnesium, sodium, and phosphate, a combination rarely, if ever, seen in meteorites. Uh-oh. Other bits of Bennu contain hydrated clay minerals known as phyllosilicates, as well as carbonates, magnetite, and sulfide minerals. All of these were anticipated but are good to see. Also, it contained organic compounds, carbon-carbon or carbon-hydrogen bonds, including a large amount of the ringed molecules known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. All right. Very cool. So they have been making some progress with this, but this mission has been taking such a long time to just get into the data, to get into what exactly is going on with this mission, and unfortunately, for now, we just gotta wait, which is not a lot of fun, and frankly, it stinks because you really want to see them live up to the expectations, and I assume they will. But the expectations that they set out to basically say this is going to be the next big thing, this is going to basically tell us whether or not, or greatly help us in the study of seeing whether life here on Earth was a result of meteorites or asteroids containing organic chemicals and organic compounds to seed the Earth and ultimately bring life here. Because there is an idea that life here on Earth was seeded by these outside sources that had H2O, they had hydrogen, they had carbon on them, they had all these different molecules and compounds that helped to create life billions and billions of years ago. So they were hoping that this is going to be something that really gives us a lot of evidence to whether or not that is true. And so far, it's just been really slow, which kind of stinks. But that is not the worst thing. There are other worse things. One thing that I talk about many times on the podcast is, are we alone? Well, we're searching for it. We're looking for it. We're trying to figure it out. This next article, space.com. Search for intelligent aliens explores new radio frequency realms. Go back these freaking ads, man. Why? Side note. What are we doing? What are we doing? Who's playing these games? Anyways, back to the article. A new European search for extraterrestrial radio signals at low uncharted frequencies is underway. Having already listened to over 1.6 million star systems. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has traditionally focused on radio frequencies higher than a gigahertz, such as the hydrogen line frequency at 1.42 gigahertz. SETI astronomers tend to shy away from lower frequencies because Earth's atmospheres renders observations noisy. However, Europe's low-frequency array, or LOFAR for short, is specifically designed to conduct radio astronomy at these very frequencies. LOFAR is an array of radio antennas that span hundreds of kilometers across Europe, centered in the Netherlands, but additional stations in France, Germany, Ireland, Latvia, Poland, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. The stations incorporated two types of antenna: low-band antennas that operate between 10 and 90 megahertz, and high-band antennas that listen to the universe between 100 and 250 megahertz. So they have these stations all across with the hope of what the SETI mission, which has been kind of operating for a couple of years, which we haven't really gotten any clear evidence, despite all of these hearings and committees talking about the UFOs and UAPs and all that kind of stuff. The SETI mission has not been completed yet, and they've been going on it for quite a long period of time. But maybe this could be the next step. This search used the high band antennas to listen for radio signals at frequencies of between 100 and 190 megahertz. Primarily, the search is looking for leakage from high power transmitters such as planetary radar or communications with spacecraft. The search encompassed 1,633,198 target star systems identified by NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite and the European Space Agency's Gaia astrometric probe. By using multiple sites, astronomers are able to negate the effects. of radio frequency interference and quickly rule out any positives. That's good. No narrowband radio signals with the distinctive frequency drift caused by the orbital motion of an exoplanet hosting a transmitter beaming out signals with the power of at least tens of millions of watts were detected. However, the low frequency search is only just the beginning and improvements are coming. Nice. So, and then it kind of ends. We have billions of star systems to explore, and we'll be relying on some machine learning techniques to sift through the immense volume of data, said Johnson. That in and of itself is interesting and would be fairly ironic if humankind discovered alien life by using artificial intelligence. Let's see, because I mean, you're scanning a lot of this stuff. You would really want to make sure that you get your results back quickly, and why not use artificial intelligence to help you sift through the data? Because you can ask these artificial things such as ChatGPT some really interesting questions, such as this. I had this conversation, and I've talked about it previously, but you can use voice memos basically. So you're not typing back and forth with this thing. You can basically have a conversation with ChatGPT. And this is a conversation that I had because I was thinking about how one with missions such as the Voyager Pro or missions like we talked about earlier to Titan, how are they going to send signals that far out? I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions and billions of miles even to things that are super far away where I don't know how we're getting signals even back from them, right? So I asked, how do we speak to this stuff? And kind of this conversation turned into a much larger thing. So my first question, how does NASA send signals to a spacecraft that is millions or billions of miles away? The response, NASA communicates with distant spacecraft using large antenna on Earth called Deep Space Network. These antennas send signals in the form of radio waves which travel through space at the speed of light. Despite the vast distances, the signals can still reach spacecraft millions or even billions of miles away. And then I said, why radio waves? And radio waves are used for communication with spacecraft because they can travel through space without being significantly absorbed or scattered. They are a form of electromagnetic radiation that can propagate through the vacuum of space. Additionally, radio waves are relatively easy to generate, detect, and encode information onto. So I said, so theoretically, that means a radio station's wave are also sent out to those same spacecraft. Like they could tune into a specific radio station on Earth. And this is where my mind kind of started to turn a little bit. And there was a question that I was thinking about that I wanted to ask, but I was trying to lead ChatGPT in this direction. And now you'll see. In theory, yes. Waves from Earth, including those from radio stations, propagate into space. However, the strength of radio signals weakens significantly with distance, and the signals from typical Earth radio stations are not designed to reach spacecraft in deep space. For communication with spacecraft, specialized systems such as the Deep Space Network used high-powered transmitters and large antennas to send focused signals. These signals are carefully designed for space communication, taking into account factors like distance, signal strength, and data integrity. So, while radio waves from Earth do extend into space, they are not intended for communication with distant spacecraft, and the specific signals for the Deep Space Network are designed for that purpose. Now I was interested. How far out will radio waves from Earth actually go? ChatGPT says, well, the reach of radio waves from Earth depends on various factors, including the power of the transmitter, the frequency of the radio waves, and the surrounding conditions. In general, waves especially radio waves from Earth, can travel into space indefinitely. However, their strength diminishes with distance due to factors like spreading and absorption. All right. And then I said, could radio waves from a radio station in Pittsburgh, PA reach 1 million miles away, for example? And it said, no, radio waves from a typical radio station in Pittsburgh, PA would not be able to reach 1 million miles away. The signals from such stations are not designed for long distance space communication. They are generally intended to cover a specific geographic area, and their strength diminishes significantly with distance due to factors like spreading, absorption, and interference. Which makes sense because if you play something at a radio station in Pittsburgh, say on 100.1 FM or something like that, and then you go to 100.1 FM in California, you'll turn into a different radio signal. It won't be the same signal because the signal from Pittsburgh is not going to reach California, which makes sense. Is the concept for things such as digital waves, like things that are posted on the internet. Like, could you send a photo, a digital photo, like basically a Wi-Fi text message, like a WhatsApp message, out into space? Like, is that a form of information that you can send out? It's basically kind of what I was asking. Transmission of data over the internet involves different principles compared to the traditional radio broadcasting. Internet data is typically transmitted using a combination of wired and wireless technology, and it doesn't rely on the same type of radio waves as broadcast by radio stations. Digital data is broken down into packets and sent through a network of interconnected computers. So that's the main difference right there. What types of electromagnetic waves and how far can each of them be transmitted into space? And then this is where we'll end right here, because then I kind of continue asking it through the rest of this, I guess, conversation, you will. I go through each one of these and ask how far could each of them reach into space, and I'll explain that after. All right, number one. Now, these are from longest wavelength to shortest wavelength. So longest, radio waves, used for radio and television broadcasting as well as communication with spacecraft. They can travel long distances, even interplanetary distances. Number two, microwaves, utilized for technology like microwave ovens and certain communication devices. They can penetrate the Earth's atmosphere and are used for satellite communication. Their range can vary, and they are used for both short and long distance communication. Up next, infrared waves. Commonly associated with heat and space communication, infrared is often used for specific applications. Its range can extend across astronomical distances. Visible light. The range of electromagnetic waves that we can perceive as light. While visible light is crucial for optical communication, it is limited by factors such as absorption and scattering in space. Ultraviolet waves. Beyond the violet end of the visible spectrum, ultraviolet waves are often absorbed by the Earth's atmosphere. In space, they can be used for specific astronomical observations. X-rays. Known for their medical applications, X-rays can be used for astrophysical observations. They have high energy and can penetrate various materials. In space, X-rays can be detected from distant celestial objects, such as black holes. Gamma rays, also black holes. The most energetic form of electromagnetic radiation, gamma rays have applications in medical imaging and can also be observed from space. They originate from high-energy astrophysical processes, black holes. The range over which these waves can be transmitted through space varies. So, cool conversation that I had there, kind of thinking about the ultimately the search for life also happens to come down to the ability to communicate with this life that's out there in the universe. And I think it's important, if we are able to send messages out, we send out good messages, because as this society stands, there's a lot of issues. I talked about this on my Instagram a while ago and on my Twitter as well. I think this was my Twitter. I tweeted, human beings and our civilization is amazing in so many ways, but can be destructive in so many ways. And the same species can give their life up for somebody that they love, sometimes even a stranger, jump in front of a bullet to protect a child who's being shot at, go into the line of fire in a distant, far off foreign country to fight in a war, dying for people that you don't even speak the same language as because you want to protect them. Human beings are capable of that. Human beings are also capable of immense atrocities as well. And it's this duality and this difference in which we kind of live in that I have so oftentimes have problems with, because you feel as though sometimes those people that are on death row are not human, are not the same thing as you or I. These people that are serial killers that kill people just for fun, they can't be human. They're subhuman. And many of us would like to think that because we wouldn't want to associate ourselves with that we could never be that. Unfortunately, every single serial killer that is locked up currently and has ever been locked up is the exact same thing that we are. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think it's important to understand and to know how great we can be, how friendly and welcoming we can be to one another, giving up our lives for one another. Because once you know how awful and how terrible we can be, that's when you can then utilize your goodness and whatever you have left of your goodness for good. Because there are stories just like the one that I'm about to share of humans using, in the face of just pure destruction and hell on earth, using whatever they have to try and comfort, spread good, spread joy, be protectors. And hopefully this story will kind of bring home this idea of that humans are both. Humans are both amazing creatures, but humans are also creatures in which there is immense destruction and a probability of total annihilation. This is the tragic ordeal of the Berlin Zoo in World War II. I'm going to read this for you. Khalid El Hassan, May 10th, 2019. The Berlin Zoo's baptism of fire occurred during an RAF air raid on September 8th, 1941, when it was struck by half a dozen 100-kilogram bombs. The stables in which the het cattle were housed caught fire from incendiaries, and a forest-themed restaurant in the surrounding area sustained damage. All in all, however, the damage was relatively light, especially compared to what was to come a few years later. Repairs were completed within a few weeks, and the zoo was soon back in business, as if nothing happened. The zoo was not hit again during the next 2 years, other than for 5 100-kilogram bombs that struck some empty space between the wolves' enclosures and the cattle pastures. Then, catastrophe struck in November of 1943, when Arthur Harris, the head of RAF Bomber Command, launched the Battle of Berlin, an attempt to win the war by reducing the German capital to rubble and destroying the Luftwaffe in the process. The effort failed but Berlin suffered heavy damage before Harris acknowledged that and the bombings were tapered off. By then, the Berlin Zoo had been wrecked. The worst damage was sustained on the nights of November 22nd and 23rd, 1943. On the 22nd, over 250 RAF heavy bombers struck western Berlin, including the Tiergarten district in which the zoo is located. During a 15-minute stretch that night, starting at around 7:15 p.m., numerous high explosive bombs and more than 1,000 incendiaries rained on the Berlin Zoo, blasting and setting alight many animal enclosures, including those housing the elephants, monkeys, and predators. Firefighters were unable to contain the blazing infernos as the city's water mains had been broken by bombs. Within a quarter of an hour, almost a third of the zoo's animals had been killed. It was not over, however. The RAF returned the following night for another heavy raid. And around 8 p.m. on November 23rd, the zoo's aquarium was completely demolished when a stick of bombs scored a direct hit, killing most of its inhabitants, blasting and scattering them far and wide. The following morning, pedestrians making their way along the nearby Budapestris were greeted by the startling sight of crocodile bodies on the street, their carcasses having been flung there by the blasts. Such episodes gave rise to frightful rumors that some dangerous animals had escaped the zoo, alive, and were prowling Berlin streets in a maddened state. Stampeding elephants were said to be running amok amidst the city's rubble, while tigers were supposedly stalking the streets, slaughtering and mauling all they came across. As with most rumors, the stories were greatly exaggerated. Some potentially dangerous animals did escape their enclosures, but almost all were chased down and killed within the zoo's confines. The only animals that made it out of the zoo were a dingo that was recaptured, plus some monkeys and birds. This is within the zoo. Anti-aircraft gun. Demolition and recovery. Making things worse for the Berlin Zoo's animals was the nearby zoo tower, one of the massive concrete towers brimming with anti-aircraft guns that sought to protect Berlin from Allied bombers. Picture the distress felt by pet dogs or cats when fireworks go off, and multiply it by orders of magnitude to get an idea of what the Berlin Zoo's residents must have gone through. The caged denizens were forced to endure the roar and drone of heavy bombers overhead, the shrieks, explosions, and concussions of the detonating bombs, the ensuing smoke and fire and dust, and the rapid cracks and booms of the flak guns firing away. Many of the zoo's animals went insane from fear, and others died outright from terror. Among the casualties of the November bombing raid were 2 giraffes, 2 hippos, a black rhinoceros, a sea elephant, and half the deer and antelopes. Out of 8 elephants, the only survivor was a bull named Siam, who exhibited signs of psychological trauma until his death in 1947 from natural causes. Meat being scarce during the war, the dead animals were butchered to feed the staff and the teams of soldiers and prisoners of war who were put to work clearing the rubble. And I want to take a moment and just look at this image right here, because this image right here is exactly what I'm speaking about. Humans are complicated. Humans are a weird creature. In the face of such destruction and annihilation and death and despair and bombs and fires and people being shot, you have this woman here feeding in a makeshift room. Look at the floor of this place. Look at the walls of this place. Look at the state of the bathtub. Look at the state of the piping, of the walls, of the sink. This was hell on earth. And yet, in this picture, the caption reads, Shoebill, temporarily housed in his Berlin zookeeper's home as the Red Army stormed into the German capital in 1945. This woman is opening up her home, what's left of it, to these animals at the zoo, showcasing that while humans are dropping bombs and trying to kill as many people as possible, destroy as much of the city as possible, we have people such as this woman who is using her time to deliver sustenance to these animals, possibly some food that she would have used to feed herself or her family. But she's using it to give to this animal. It's complicated. It's weird. Let's continue reading. As one of the Heck brothers put it, quote, we had meat coming out of our ears. Many of the edible animals which had fallen victim to the air raid ended up in the pot. Particularly tasty were the crocodile tails. Cooked tender in big containers, they tasted like fat chicken. The dead deer, buffalo, and antelopes provided hundreds of meals for man and beast alike. Later on, bear ham and bear sausage were a particular delicacy. The bombing raids of November 1943 were not the end of the zoo's ordeal, as it was struck again and again in subsequent months by explosive bombs, incendiaries, and aerial mines. In 1944 alone, it was hit on January 29th and 30th, February 15th, March 4th, May 8th, numerous times in October, and on December 31st. It was struck again on February 24th, 1945. Despite the damage, the Berlin Zoo remained open almost to the end, not closing its gates until April 22nd, 1945, as the Red Army stormed into the city. What little had been left of the zoo was completely destroyed in the ensuing battle. Among the few survivors was a shoebill bird, whose keeper took it home and somehow managed to keep it alive as Berlin was systematically destroyed in bitter street fighting. Another survivor was a baby hippo named Natchki that had miraculously made it through the raids of November 1943. When some boys braved the fires, engulfing its shelter to help it escape into a nearby pond. Natchki survived the war and became a darling of the public when the zoo reopened. He went on to sire 35 offspring before he died decades later in 1988. Today, a life-size sculpture of Natchki stands at the entrance to the Berlin Zoo's Hippo building. History's weird. And I just want to keep this image up. This was less than 100 years ago. This is many people, especially if you're in your 30s or 40s, your parents, especially your grandparents, remember this. They lived in this world of confusion. Because on one side, you have these people who work at the zoos who are not involved in the war. They're not soldiers. They're not fighting. They're going to their job at the zoo to provide for these animals. And without them, the animals die. Then you have other humans who their goal is to defeat the enemy, to drop bombs on this city, to take it over. And you have these two clashes between them, which they don't know that they're really fighting against each other. The bombers are not trying to take these people out per se. They're just trying to destroy the city as much as possible so that they can come in and take it over. And these zoo people are hoping that these very same people are not dropping bombs on their particular location. You could drop bombs a couple streets down, but not on the zoo. Not where these animals that I care so much for, that I'll go into a burning sanctuary, a burning environment where I could potentially lose my own life to save a hippo, to save an animal that many would believe that if you were out in the wild, the hippo wouldn't think twice. It would eat you right then and there. It's such a weird place to be as a species where we're capable of these two things, of immense love and of carefulness and sacrifice, ultimately, for these beings that in many cases would not reciprocate it, wouldn't think twice about trying to save us. But that's the species that we are. But we're also a species that drops bombs on these places, that tries to inflict as much harm and as much damage as possible, to kill as many people as possible, to end bloodlines, to end family trees, to destroy the legacy of families who have lived in this particular city for decades, if not hundreds of years in this particular area of the earth. That's the ultimate cost of war. It burns a family tree to the ground, erases it from the history books. Some of these families, they had no offspring that survived after them. They're done. They're gone. They're not coming back. That family's DNA is not getting passed down to 2023, much less 2020, much less 2000, much less 1950. And you have all of this craziness and death and destruction, and still these people are able to find a way to provide for another species that isn't them. This is one of the stories that I came across on Instagram, and it perfectly encapsulates the duality of our species, of the greatness on both sides, the greatness of love and compassion and sacrifice that us humans can exhibit, but also the great destruction and savagery that we can also exhibit as well. Interesting article. Interesting article. On to our next thing. I am going to share something. It's a hypothetical situation. This will be the last thing on today's pod. The last thing we'll talk about. We've been going for a little over an hour. All right. Get a nice little sip here. All right. Yeah. Thank God. My beautiful daughter is sleeping. She's been really bouncing back since her surgery, which I'm really glad. You could tell that she's back to herself, and the thing with dogs is you can tell that she has a little personality to her. She's a unique individual. She's a unique she's her own person, man. I love her. And she gets crazy and she gets so excited when she plays, when she sees you come home. You could be outside for 5 minutes or 5 hours. She greets you the exact same way with so much excitement that she'll start biting your hand. She'll start biting your clothes. She'll start pulling on you, and it hurts and it's annoying. but she just gets so excited that she has to somehow get this extra energy out of her body, and she does it by biting with her mouth on things. If you give her a toy, she'll bite the toy. She has a carrot that has a bunch of squeaky things inside of it, and she'll just, if you give that to her as soon as you see her, she couldn't be happier in the world. And I've never had a dog like that. A lot of dogs, they'll run around or they'll get the zoomies. She gets the zoomies as well, but she's different in that she loves to be with you, and each and every single time you leave and then you come back and you see her again, it's like the first time she's ever met you. There's never a time where she's not super happy to see you either. She could be waking up middle of the night and sleeping. I come home at 5:15, 5:30 a.m. sometimes. She's fully asleep when I come into the room. She wakes up, stretches a little bit, and then she comes over and she starts cuddling with me in bed, and she's licking my face, and she's pushing her body up against mine so that we can cuddle. And just a dog I've never had any, I guess, even relationship like that with. And now she's sleeping, and I don't know. With each day that passes, the other day, my wife and I, we were going back and forth talking about her. And I was showing her earlier pictures of her when she was a baby, when we first got her back in January, February of this year. And in that time, she is grown up so much, and she's changed as an animal. We've helped her become a little bit of a grown up, a little bit of training, a little bit of understanding of English as well. I can communicate with her now in a much more profound way than I could in the past. I can, like I said, with the biting and stuff, when she gets so excited, you can advocate, be like, hey, do you want a treat? I'll give you a cookie if you sit. You gotta sit down, and I'll give you a treat. Okay. She she understands what you're saying. She's like, okay, I'm really excited, but let me sit. And you're like, all right, wait a couple of seconds, boom, go give her the treat. She's very smart in that way. And to see her play, she plays differently than any dog I've ever seen. She does this thing where she'll lift up, if she has a rug or particularly our couch, she'll with her mouth pull out the flap of the couch, open it up, and then she'll have a tennis ball, and she'll, with one hand, push it under, and then with that same hand try and pull it back out while holding the if it's a blanket, she'll hold the blanket up and push the ball underneath and then pull it back out. But she'll do the same thing with the couch, where she'll pull a flap up, push the ball underneath, and then try and pull it back out. And then sometimes it goes too far in, so she has to go behind the couch, and then she'll try and poke it out from that side. And then she comes around to the front side, and then she'll basically just dive into the bottom of the couch. And she's gotten to a point now where she doesn't hit her head. She just basically just spears right underneath. And it's funny to see, because she'll do that for 15, 20 minutes until she's exhausted, like nonstop. And she's just got her own personality that I've never seen in a dog, and I wouldn't have her any other way. I'd like it if she would be a little bit more chill and calm and would just love to cuddle with you, but that'll come when she's older. Right now, I'm enjoying her being very active and very free and enjoying kind of the life that she has right now. So I love her. Maybe if we get an opportunity, I'd love to um try and clone her. And I would imagine that it's not going to be super cheap to try and clone her and have a baby that is basically a descendant of her, or a direct copy of her DNA. That'd be really cool to do, so that we can kind of keep her alive once she's no longer here. Because, I mean, I'm 50-50. I'm 50-50 thinking every day is amazing, and then 50-50 thinking we're one day closer to the end. And that's just how I think. with her. I have so much joy and fun with her and spending time with her, taking her to the dog park, seeing her interact with other dogs. She interacts with other dogs differently than even other golden retrievers I've seen. She's very submissive. She's very nice. She'll come up, say hello, and then leave you alone. And then she'll come up and she'll bring a ball to you. She'll drop it. She'll give you the ball. You grab the ball. You go running away. And then she'll chase after you. You turn around. You start chasing her. She runs away. And then she'll fall on the ground and she'll open her stomach up to these other dogs. Just because she's very submissive. She wants another partner. She wants somebody else to play with her all the time. And hopefully my wife and I can give her whether that be a cat or another dog, somebody else to be in her life, another companion. I'd love that for her. I think that'd be really good for her, but maybe when she's older. Anywho, all right, now let's get into our last topic. Let's hope that you can see this. All right. All right. I saw this on Instagram as well. A couple of things I've seen on Instagram I put on the pod today, but this is a hypothetical scenario. You have to choose 5 of these units to defend you. And then there's 20 units here. You have to choose 5 of them. And then the other 15 units will come and try and take you out. So you have to choose 5 of these units, and let's go through the list. 750 Neanderthals. Wooden sticks, stones, not really a lot of technology here. That's our first group. Next is 500 Egyptian spearmen. Okay. Still very, very old. Mostly spears and shields. Next, 450 Persian immortals. This is a special unit with a little bit better armor and a little bit better weaponry. Coming up next, 300 Spartans. Very, very famous. Going on to our 200 legionaries. Coming up next, better armor, better gear. After that, we have 150 Vikings, followed by 100 Templar Knights. A lot of chainmail, a lot of armor, big giant swords, big giant shields. After them, we have 90 Samurai. Some of the most skilled fighters of all time, especially when it comes to blades. After that, we have 80 Longbowmen. So basically, these are classical age era people with bows and arrows. After that, you have 75 Mongol archers, as opposed to 80 Longbowmen. Mongol archers, obviously from the Mongolian Empire. After that, you have our first basic, not even modern, but our first firearm in the bunch here, which is 65 conquistadors, followed by 50 Swedish musketeers, followed by 40 Napoleonic Old Guard. And then after that, you have 45 grenadiers, basically still muskets, but all around better fighters as well, better supplies. After that, you have 25 cowboys. Now we're starting to get into multiple rounds able to be fired, semi-automatic fire right here with their revolvers. After that, you have 15 trench soldiers. So this is now World War I technology. So you'll potentially have some automatic weapons, but I'm assuming this is mostly going to still be semi-automatic rifles, pistols, that sort of thing. Then after that, you have 10 Wehrmacht soldiers. Now we're getting into submachine guns. We're getting into automatic weapon fire. And you have 10 of those soldiers. After that, you have 5 Soviet Cold War soldiers. So this is 1970s, 1980s technology, weaponry, particularly of Russia. So you're dealing with AK-47s, heavy duty automatic weapons, and you get 5 of those soldiers. Next up, you have 4 suicide bombers. Now in the picture, this particular person has an MP5. It looks like a submachine gun, fully automatic. I don't know if they'll have weapons. I'm going to say that it's just the suicide bombers. So it's basically they go out into the battle and they blow themselves up to hopefully inflict as much damage as possible. So a very valuable member, somebody you certainly don't want to go up against. And then finally, the last one is 1 Navy SEAL. So all up to date, the best technology on the face of the planet, the best weaponry, the best planning in terms of what the mission is, all of this stuff. So if you were to choose 5 of these units to defend you, and if you want to throw down in the comments who your 5 you would choose, who do you think are the best 5, and then also who do you think are going to be the worst 5, like the 5 that you would not want with you because you would get absolutely destroyed. And I'll do both, but first, I kind of wanted to show you. I put this into ChatGPT to see kind of what ChatGPT would say. I know we've been using a lot of ChatGPT today, but let's continue on that theme. So I asked ChatGPT, here's a hypothetical scenario, 20 groups of troops, choose 5 to defend you and the remaining 15. Here are the groups, blah, blah, blah. All right, here is what ChatGPT said. In this hypothetical scenario, I would choose the following 5 groups to defend me and the remaining 15. Number 1, Spartans, 300 Spartans. Known for their discipline and exceptional combat skills, Spartans would be a formidable frontline defense. Next up, 450 Persian immortals, highly trained and well-equipped. The Persian immortals will complement the Spartans in creating a strong defensive force. Number 3, Templar Knights. With their heavy armor and elite training, Templar Knights would serve as powerful and resilient core for the defensive formation. Number 4, Napoleonic Old Guard. The Old Guard was renowned for its unwavering discipline and effectiveness in battle, making them a valuable addition to the defensive forces. And then last, 1 Navy SEAL. A modern and highly trained Special Forces operative, the Navy SEAL would bring contemporary tactics, technology, and versatility to the defense. These selected groups cover a range of historical periods and warfare styles, providing a diverse and well-rounded defense against various threats. The combination of ancient warriors, medieval knights, and modern special forces would offer a balanced defense against a wide array of challenges. So, some good stuff here. However, I see some holes here. 1 Navy SEAL, you're going to only have... you're going against the other 15 of these. So you're going against 5 Soviet Cold War soldiers and 10 Wehrmacht soldiers and 15 trench soldiers. That's 30 soldiers that have weapons, at least semi-automatic weapons. I don't think a Napoleonic Old Guard is going to be able to defeat that. I think, unfortunately, in this case, you got to kind of choose between quantity of just sheer people. Yeah, let's go back to it. Because there are many different factors to choose from in this particular example. Are you going to take the 750 Neanderthals? I don't know. That's 750 troops right there. Even though they don't have the exact best equipment, they have the most amount of just straight pure bodies. So they would be a good defensive force just based on their quantity. However, if I were going to be picking, I would probably say I would take 300 Spartans and then just basically 15 trench soldiers, 10 Wehrmacht soldiers, 5 Soviet Cold War soldiers, and then I might take either the 1 Navy SEAL Or maybe I would add either the 25 cowboys or the 750 Neanderthals. Now, those final two choices for different reasons. Neanderthals, like I said, I don't want to be on the other side of 700 and almost 1,000 Neanderthals. So once you get up against this, if you're not selecting anybody from this top row, 750 Neanderthals, 500 Egyptian spearmen, that's 1,250. That's 1,250 people right there that you're going off against. You think one Navy SEAL is going to do anything to that? No. And then if you don't select any Persian immortals, that's what? Almost 1,500 people? Yeah, good luck with that. I don't think 5 Soviet Cold War soldiers will be able to do too much against that. However, I think if you have 300 Spartans and you have 10 Wehrmacht soldiers and 5 Soviet Cold War soldiers, 25 cowboys, and 15 trench soldiers, you have enough firepower. And I'm speaking about semi-automatic to fully automatic weaponry to take that out. Now, a choice that could be made here is potentially the suicide bombers. You could potentially wipe out a big chunk of the Neanderthals, Egyptian spearmen, and Persian immortals right there, just based off their sheer explosive power right there. Because the only other person that would really have explosives would be the Navy SEAL, maybe up to the trench soldiers. Maybe they might have some small form grenades, but you're not going to get as much widespread damage as the suicide bombers. So that is something to think about as well. But I think your best bet is to choose one unit that has a lot of guys. So you got to choose one person from this bottom row. I would say either the Neanderthals or the Spartans are probably your best bet. The Egyptian spearmen and Persian immortals are probably second there. I'm not thinking too much about the legionnaires. There's just not enough guys. 200 legionnaires versus 500 Egyptian spearmen. I mean, very vastly outnumbered, and the technological differences between the two are not so much that is insurmountable. However, I think the Spartans of this group are the best fighters. Then down that next row, I would think maybe about the archers, but the archers will be absolutely no match against any of the modern era Soviet Cold War soldiers, the Wehrmacht soldiers, or the trench soldiers, maybe even the cowboys. Now, the cowboys don't have a lot of armor, so that is something to keep in mind. Then the conquistadors, the musketeers, Napoleonic Old Guard, and the grenadiers, just too much reload time. They're not going to be very effective. And once we get into these older style of units, they fight in a different way than we currently do today. They don't use guerrilla warfare. They line up in lines and they fire off their muskets. They go ding, 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 ding. 3, 2, 1, boom. And then they stand in a line and they just get completely destroyed by modern day technology. You take an automatic weapon and you can easily wipe out the entire 40 guys, Napoleonic Old Guard, 35 grenadiers, even 25 cowboys. You're dealing with very early semi-automatic technology. Those revolvers could easily break, could easily get destroyed because the technology is just not there, which is also something to think about with the trench soldiers as well. Potential faulty or malfunction in their equipment right there. Something that for the blades is not going to be too much of a factor. Even the Neanderthals, their stuff might break. Their tools that they're going to be using might break because they're made out of wood or whatever. You may have it, but there's 750 of them. So you could overwhelm somebody just by sheer numbers. But I do think your best bet to defeat 15 of these other group with these 4 or with these 5 is going to be, my final vote is Spartans, trench soldiers, Wehrmacht soldiers, Soviet Cold War soldiers, and cowboys. Let me know what you think. I don't know. There is no right answer, really. Let me actually sub out cowboys for Neanderthals. I think now looking at it, total units for me: 750 Neanderthals, 300 Spartans, 1,050 soldiers. Then we add 25, 30 other units. 30 modern day era, well, basically 15 automatic weapons, and then 15 people with semi-automatic firearms. I think that would be a more than capable enough to take out any of the other longbowmen, Mongol archers, conquistadors, Swedish musketeers, Napoleonic Old Guard, and the Grenadiers, maybe even the Cowboys. But I think no matter how you slice it, it's going to be very, very hard for somebody to win this. Now, if you do 10 versus 10, then maybe you're a little bit better shape, but I don't know. Let me know what you think. Put it down in the comments below. And thank you so much for listening. Very fun podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'll speak to you soon. Peace out.